In the quiet reaches of the Arendor galaxy, stars shimmered faintly against the endless blackness, as if hesitant to witness what was about to unfold. On the surface of a small human colony ship, the Dauntless, Commander Elias Hart stood alone. In the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the distant points of light. To most civilizations, humans were weak, fragile, and insignificant, a species meant to survive quietly in the shadows of greater powers. But Elias knew something they did not. Humans had a spark that could not be calculated, tamed, or predicted. The galaxy was at the edge of fear. The Zarn Collective, a ruthless alien empire, had conquered systems with terrifying efficiency. Entire fleets and planets fell under their shadow, leaving nothing but scorched voids and shattered hope behind. The humans on the Dauntless were preparing to face the same overwhelming force. Around him, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, their faces showing determination and anxiety in equal measure. They knew the statistics. They knew the odds. The Zarn fleet outnumbered them 100 to 1. They outgunned them 1,000 to 1. And yet, Elias remained calm. The briefing room was filled with holographic projections of Zarn ships, massive dreadnoughts that could crush entire planets without effort. Their weapons glowed like molten fire, bristling and deadly. Members of the Galactic Council had already surrendered the sector, convinced resistance was futile. Many of the human allies had begged for retreat, fear in their voices, despair in their eyes. Elias cleared his throat. "They think we are nothing," he said softly, his voice carrying across the room. "They see us as small, weak, harmless. But we are not harmless. We are human." The words hung in the air, simple yet powerful. The crew exchanged glances. A mixture of nervous laughter and quiet smiles spread. It was a dangerous moment to feel hope, yet the tension in the room seemed lighter somehow. For a brief instant, they remembered why they had trained for years, why they had risked leaving their homes to defend something bigger than themselves. A young pilot named Lyra spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Commander, you really think we can do this?" Elias turned to her, his face calm but resolute. "Not think, Lyra, I know. They have never faced us before. They have never faced a species that refuses to follow rules, that refuses to be predicted. They have never faced humans." Outside, the stars seemed to shiver under the weight of the approaching threat. The Zarn fleet was advancing, a dark wave moving with unstoppable momentum. It would have terrified anyone else. But the humans on the Dauntless felt a different kind of fear, a fear that sharpened their senses, that made their hearts beat faster, that reminded them how alive they were. Elias stepped closer to the observation window, his hand pressed against the cold glass. Memories of past battles, losses, and sacrifices filled his mind. He remembered entire colonies erased, friends lost, dreams shattered. And yet, in that memory, he also remembered why humans survived. Because humans adapted. Humans endured. Humans fought even when all seemed lost. The crew gathered near him, sensing the silent strength radiating from their commander. Each one had a story of struggle and survival, a story that had led them to this moment. And now, they were about to write the next chapter, a chapter that could change the galaxy forever. Elias smiled faintly, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. "They call us weak," he whispered. "Let's remind them what a flea can do." It was a strange comparison, almost humorous in the face of certain death, yet it carried an undeniable truth. A flea is small, a flea is underestimated, but a flea bites. And when it bites, the pain is real, the impact lasting, and the giant it touches cannot ignore it. In that instant, the crew felt it. The quiet, steady confidence that this battle was not over before it began. The galaxy might see them as insignificant. The Zarn might see them as easy prey, but the humans of the Dauntless knew something deeper. They were small, they were fragile, but they were alive, and that life carried a force no machine or alien fleet could calculate. And so in the calm before the storm, the humans waited. They waited not with despair, but with courage. They waited not with fear, but with anticipation. The Dauntless floated silently among the stars, a tiny dot in the vast galaxy. But within it burned the heart of humanity, ready to leap into battle, in ways no enemy could ever imagine. The Zarn fleet moved closer, a dark shadow stretching across the stars. Their massive warships glimmered like cold steel in space, each one bristling with weapons capable of erasing planets in moments. Thousands of smaller strike crafts swirled around them like stingers, ready to swarm anything that dared resist. The galaxy had grown accustomed to fear. Many civilizations had surrendered before the Zarn even arrived. Resistance seemed impossible. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the crew worked in silence, their hands moving across controls with precise rhythm. The ship was smaller than a Zarn dreadnought and far slower in raw firepower. If they tried to match the aliens in strength, they would be annihilated, but Elias Hart had a plan. He leaned over the holographic display, eyes sharp. "We don't fight like them," he said. "We don't fight with size. We fight with speed, with cunning, with surprise." The young pilot, Lyra, tightened her grip on the controls, her knuckles white. "Commander, they're so close. How can we possibly—" Elias cut her off with a calm smile. "Watch, learn, and survive." The Dauntless surged forward, not in a straight line, but in a series of sudden erratic movements. The Zarn fleet aimed their sensors at the human ship, but it was like trying to catch smoke with a net. Every time the aliens fired, the missiles streaked past empty space. Every attempt to scan the ship came back with nothing. To the Zarn commanders, confusion spread. Their massive fleet was meant to overwhelm, to strike with perfect coordination, yet the humans moved like lightning, like a flea bouncing unpredictably across a giant's back. The Dauntless darted in and out of shadows cast by nearby asteroids, vanished behind drifting debris, then struck again from angles the aliens had not even considered. Inside the human ship, the crew felt a rush unlike any they had known. Fear and excitement blended together, making their hearts race, sharpening their focus. Every movement mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. They were small, yes, but smallness carried freedom. They could twist, dodge, disappear and reappear where no one expected. The first salvo from the Zarn hit. Nothing. The Dauntless had already moved. A pulse of energy shot from the human ship, striking the lead Zarn warship's shields. Sparks of electricity danced across the alien hull, and the massive vessel shuddered. For the first time, the Zarn realized they were facing a foe they did not understand. Elias watched the screens, heart steady. "They are learning too slowly," he muttered, "and they will never learn in time." The humans on board were small, fragile compared to the monstrous alien fleet. But fragility did not mean weakness. Every pilot, every engineer, every crew member had trained for this. Every human life on the Dauntless was a thread in a tapestry of courage and cunning. They moved together like one mind, unpredictable yet precise. One of the engineers, Jarek, called out from his console. "Commander, their communications are scrambled. They're trying to regroup." Elias nodded. "Good, let them panic. Let them wonder where the attack will come from next. That confusion is our weapon." Across the galaxy, distant allies watched in disbelief. They could see the human ship dancing among Zarn giants, evading fire, striking, disappearing again. "It's impossible," whispered a council leader. "How can one ship do this?" But Elias knew. It was not impossible. Humans had a way of turning the smallest advantage into the greatest strength. The Zarn had expected straightforward resistance, predictable maneuvers. They had expected fear. They had not expected ingenuity. They had not expected unpredictability. They had not expected the human spirit. And so as the battle began, the Dauntless moved like a shadow, a tiny flicker against the enormous Zarn fleet. The humans inside felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down, yet they were unbroken. Small, yes, fragile, yes, but alive, clever, and ready to bite. Elias whispered once more, almost to himself, "The first move is always ours, and when it lands, it will change everything." The Zarn did not yet understand what had begun. They had no idea that one tiny ship, one human Flea, would soon turn the tide of a battle that should have been lost before it started. The Zarn fleet had never faced anything like the Dauntless. Their massive warships, built to crush entire worlds, could not touch a human ship that moved like a shadow. Confusion spread quickly through the ranks. Commanders barked orders that went unanswered. Sensors screamed false readings. Weapons fired, had empty space while the tiny human vessel struck again and again, unseen until it was too late. On board the Dauntless, the crew moved like a single organism. Lyra twisted the controls sharply, sending the ship spinning behind a cluster of asteroids, then firing a pulse of energy that disabled one Zarn warship's shield generator. Sparks flew across the alien hull, and systems failed in a cascade of errors. The ship shuddered violently, then went silent, drifting helplessly among the chaos. "Another one down," Jarek said, his voice tight with excitement and tension. He wiped sweat from his brow. "They don't know what hit them." Elias leaned over the controls, eyes sharp and calm. "No," he said quietly. "They do know. They just cannot respond in time. That's the difference between us and them. They calculate. We act." The humans had learned long ago that survival was not about size or strength. It was about courage, creativity, and timing. The Dauntless was tiny compared to the Zarn dreadnoughts, yet in the chaos of battle, it had become a force the aliens could not comprehend. Every move was unpredictable, every strike precise. On the Zarn command bridge, fear began to seep into the cold logic of their officers. "Impossible," one shrieked. "This ship, it should be dead." "Check the sensors." "Again," another commanded. "It is moving faster than the laws allow. It should not exist." The Zarn fleet had never learned how to fight something they could not see. They had relied on numbers, on raw power, on fear. But humans were different. Humans thrived in uncertainty. Humans thrived when everything seemed impossible. Elias watched the holographic display. 3 enemy ships were already disabled. 2 more had lost major systems and were drifting in space, unable to fire or retreat. "Good," he muttered. "Keep them off balance. Let fear spread." Inside the human ship, tension was high. Every pulse, every movement could be the last. Smoke curled through corridors, alarms blared, lights flickered. And yet there was exhilaration too, a raw, electrifying joy that comes from standing on the edge of danger and surviving against all odds. Lyra glanced at her crew. "They're panicking," she whispered. Her eyes were wide with amazement. "They don't even know where to aim." Elias nodded. "Exactly. Panic is contagious. Let it spread through them. Every hesitation, every wrong move. Use it." The Dauntless darted forward again, weaving through the Zarn fleet. Its weapons struck shields and energy conduits. One massive warship rocked violently as systems failed, its firepower reduced to nothing. Another attempted to chase the human ship, but it vanished into an asteroid field, leaving the alien crew screaming in confusion. The humans on board did not celebrate. There was no time. Every second mattered. Every decision could be the one that saved their lives or ended them. But a quiet pride flowed through them, the knowledge that they were making history. One ship, one human crew had become a force that no empire could predict, no calculation could stop. Across the galaxy, distant allies watched the transmissions, stunned into silence. They are winning," one whispered. "It's impossible. But they are winning." Elias glanced at the stars outside. The battle had only just begun, yet already the Zarn fleet was faltering, their confidence shattered, their precision gone. The humans had become a storm in the midst of giants, a small ship that struck like lightning and disappeared before the enemy could respond. And the crew of the Dauntless knew it. Humans were small, humans were fragile, but humans were unpredictable. And sometimes unpredictability was more dangerous than the strongest weapons in the galaxy. Elias leaned back slightly, a faint smile on his lips. "Let them see us," he said softly. "And let them understand. We are not what they expect." The Zarn fleet did not yet understand it, but the humans had already won something far more important than a single battle. They had taken control of the fear, the confusion, and the chaos. And in the universe, fear could spread faster than weapons ever could. The Dauntless moved like a shadow through the heart of the Zarn fleet. The aliens had begun to realize that their calculations and strategies were useless against this single, unpredictable human ship. Panic spread among their crews. Massive warships built to crush entire systems trembled as their shields failed one by one. The humans had learned what every fleet in the galaxy soon would understand. Size and firepower alone were meaningless against ingenuity, courage, and speed. Elias Hart stood at the bridge, eyes sharp, mind racing. Every move had to be perfect. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the Dauntless would be nothing more than space debris. Yet even in the tension there was exhilaration. This was the moment humans had trained for, the moment they had lived for. And now, against impossible odds, they were proving that human courage could surpass any weapon. The first strike hit a Zarn dreadnought's energy core. The ship shuddered violently as sparks of electricity arced across its hull. Alarms blared, sirens screamed, and the massive vessel lost propulsion. The crew aboard the alien ship panicked, unsure which way to aim or where to move. The Dauntless had vanished again before they could respond. "Another one disabled," Lyra said, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "They don't even know we're here." Elias nodded, his hand steady on the controls. "Good. That confusion is our advantage. Keep them off balance. Let every decision they make be a wrong one." Inside the human ship, crew members worked furiously. Engineers patched minor damage while adjusting weapons. Pilots calculated impossible maneuvers. Every heartbeat mattered. Every decision carried the weight of life and death. Yet, amidst the tension, there was also a quiet pride, a knowledge that they were making history. They were small, yes, but in their unpredictability lay power that the Zarn could not understand. One Zarn commander attempted to rally their fleet. "Focus fire! Destroy the human ship at once!" he screamed. But his orders came too late. The Dauntless darted between massive warships, striking shield generators, communication arrays, and propulsion systems with precision. Every strike crippled the enemy more than raw firepower ever could. Jarek, the chief engineer, leaned over his console, eyes wide. "Commander, they're falling apart. Entire sections of their fleet are losing control. They can't regroup," Elias allowed himself a small smile. "Exactly. One ship, one crew, one plan. That's all it takes when you're unpredictable." The Zarn fleet's panic spread like wildfire. Ships that had once moved in perfect formation now collided, missed their targets, and fired blindly. The Dauntless moved in and out, striking, disappearing, and striking again, leaving chaos in its wake. Across the galaxy, humans and allies watched in awe. It was as if one tiny ship had become a storm, tearing through giants with a power they could not see but could feel. In the chaos, Elias thought of the countless humans who had fought before, who had survived against overwhelming odds, who had refused to yield. That same determination flowed through his crew now, through every pulse of energy, through every maneuver and strike. They were fragile. They were small. But they were unstoppable in their courage. Lyra looked out at the alien, fleet wide-eyed. "It's incredible," she whispered. "We're doing it. We're winning." Elias's gaze softened for a moment. "Not just winning," he said quietly. "We are proving something. That no matter how small, how underestimated, humans can change the course of history. That even a flea can bite a giant and make it bleed." And in that moment, the Dauntless became more than a ship. It became a symbol, a warning, a spark of hope. The heart of the battle had been reached, and humans were not just surviving. They were dominating in a way the Zarn could not even comprehend. The galaxy watched in silence, stunned. One tiny human ship had entered the heart of the enemy fleet and turned chaos into victory. The humans of the Dauntless had become the storm that no calculations could stop, the unpredictable force that would be remembered forever. The Dauntless had struck deep into the Zarn fleet, but even a flea could be crushed. The ship shuddered violently as a massive enemy salvo finally found its mark. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, and smoke filled corridors. Crew members scrambled to contain fires and patch hull breaches, their hands moving quickly but with the knowledge that every second could be their last. Elias Hart stood at the controls, calm on the surface but inside a storm of adrenaline and calculation raged. "Status report," he demanded, voice cutting through the chaos. Jarek, the chief engineer, shouted back over the clamor. "Hull breaches in Section 3, weapons fluctuating. We can't hold much longer without repairs." Elias nodded, mind racing. "We keep moving. Every second we survive is a second they waste recalibrating. Don't stop, don't slow down. We've fought too far to give up now." The Zarn fleet was massive, overwhelming, and relentless, yet fear had begun to creep into their ranks. Their movements, once precise, were now chaotic. They had underestimated humans, thought one small ship could do nothing, and now they were paying the price. But the Dauntless was not invincible. Every shot, every maneuver, every strike brought the ship closer to its limit. Inside the human vessel, the crew moved with quiet heroism. Lyra maneuvered the ship around exploding debris, narrowly avoiding collisions while sending precise counterattacks. Engineers worked in near darkness, welding, rerouting energy, and improvising fixes at a speed no one would have thought possible. Elias looked at each of them, a fierce pride rising in his chest. These were ordinary humans, yes, small, fragile, and mortal, but extraordinary in courage. Each one had chosen to face the impossible and refused to yield. A sudden impact rocked the ship violently. Sparks flew, and the hull groaned under the strain. One of the human pilots, a young recruit named Dara, was thrown against a console. Blood streaked his face, but he gritted his teeth and returned to his stachio. "I'm fine, sir. I can still fight." Elias's eyes softened for a moment. "Good," he said quietly. "Every life matters, but sometimes courage counts more." The humans pressed on, striking at vital points of the Zarn fleet. Communication arrays, weapon systems, shield generators, nothing was safe. Even crippled, the humans remained unpredictable, striking again and again. The aliens panicked, unable to adapt, unable to anticipate, and unable to stop the one small ship that seemed to appear wherever it pleased. But bravery had a cost. Fires raged through sections of the Dauntless. Oxygen levels dropped. Crew members gasped, wiped blood from faces, and carried on. Every heartbeat was a battle, every decision a test of skill and will. Yet the human spirit refused to break. Elias watched the enemy falter. Massive warships were drifting helplessly, unable to fire or maneuver. Smaller ships collided in confusion. Fear was spreading like wildfire through the Zarn fleet. And yet, the humans pressed forward, knowing that even one misstep could mean annihilation. "Commander," Jarek yelled, "one of their dreadnoughts is dead in the water. Shields down, engines offline. It's over for them if we keep striking." Elias allowed himself a faint, determined smile. "Then we strike. All of us. For survival, for courage, for humanity." The crew braced themselves, hearts pounding, ready to face the final moments of the battle. Their sacrifices, their courage, their willingness to fight when the odds were hopeless, these were what made humans unstoppable. They were small, they were fragile, but in their unity, determination, and bravery, they were a storm that no fleet could endure. And in the heart of the chaos, as the Dauntless struck once more, the Zarn realized the truth too late. This was not just a battle of ships. This was a battle of will, and humans had the strongest will in the galaxy. The Zarn fleet, once a terrifying shadow over the galaxy, was now in retreat. Massive warships limped away, crippled and confused, their crews panicked and disoriented. The humans of the Dauntless had done the impossible. One small ship, a single human crew, had turned the tide of a battle that should have been lost before it began. Elias Hart stood on the bridge, exhaustion pressing against him, but a quiet satisfaction warmed his chest. The crew moved methodically, patching the ship, stabilizing systems, and checking on each other. Injuries were tended to, fires extinguished, and alarms silenced. Yet even in the calm after chaos, the weight of the battle pressed heavily upon them. They had survived, but they had survived against impossible odds. Lyra glanced at the stars outside the viewport, watching the retreating Zarn ships disappear into the darkness. Her hands trembled slightly on the controls. We actually did it, she whispered, disbelief and awe mingling in her voice. They're running. They're leaving. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Yes, Lyra, we did it. One ship, one crew, one plan. That's all it takes when you're unpredictable, when you refuse to be predictable. The galaxy, which had watched the battle from afar, was stunned. Entire civilizations had expected humans to be overwhelmed. Entire councils had assumed surrender was the only option. Yet the tiny human ship had struck fear into the hearts of the Zarn, proving that courage, ingenuity, and determination could outweigh sheer size and firepower. The crew of the Dauntless moved quietly among each other, some exhausted, some silently smiling, some hugging those who had survived beside them. They did not celebrate loudly. There was too much respect for the lives lost, and too much awareness of the fragile line between survival and death. Yet a deep pride ran through them, a pride in what humanity could achieve, even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. Jarek, the engineer, shook his head, still in awe. They thought we were weak, that one tiny ship could do nothing, and we made them flee. Elias smiled faintly. Yes, they underestimated humans. They thought a flea was insignificant, but a flea can bite, and sometimes one bite is enough to make a giant retreat. Across the galaxy, word spread like wildfire. The name the human flea began to appear in reports and whispers, in messages of hope and disbelief. To aliens, it was a warning. To humans, it was a symbol, a reminder that even the smallest, most fragile individuals could change the course of history. Elias looked at his crew, each one weary but alive, each one part of something far bigger than themselves. They had faced fear, danger, and overwhelming odds, and they had not yielded. Humanity had been underestimated, as always. But they had proven that no one could predict the strength that came from courage, heart, and unity. Outside the Dauntless, stars sparkled like distant diamonds, indifferent yet witness to the human triumph. The Zarn fleet had fled, but the galaxy now understood a vital truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were small. They were fragile. But they were unstoppable when they fought together, when they refused to surrender, and when they dared to bite where no one expected. Elias turned to his crew, voice soft but firm. We didn't just win a battle. We reminded the galaxy who we are. Tiny, yes, but full of fire. Small, yes, but full of life. Fragile, yes, but unbreakable in courage. The Dauntless floated in silence, a single dot in the vast galaxy. Yet its impact was enormous. It had changed the course of a battle, inspired hope across human colonies, and terrified an empire that had never faced such audacity before. And in that quiet victory, humanity's legend was born. The battle had ended, but its echoes stretched across the galaxy. The Zarn fleet had retreated, humiliated and terrified, their once unshakable confidence shattered. One human ship, small, fragile and seemingly insignificant, had done what entire fleets had failed to achieve. It had turned fear into victory. The name Human Flea spread like fire, whispered in shock, awe, and respect across star systems. On board the Dauntless, the crew worked quietly, repairing systems, checking on each other, and tending minor injuries. No one celebrated with extravagance. There was too much weight in what they had survived. Each heartbeat carried the memory of danger, the knowledge of how close they had come to death, and the quiet pride in their courage. Humans were not celebrated for mere victories. They were celebrated for heart, for audacity, and for the will to survive against all odds. Commander Elias Hart stood on the bridge gazing at the stars. The fleet of tiny, battered human ships that had joined them during the battle moved in formation, ready to return to their colonies. He thought of the countless humans who had fought before, who had survived impossible odds and who had refused to give in to fear. That same determination now radiated from his crew, and he knew the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. Lyra approached him quietly, still awed by the victory. "Commander, do you think they'll ever underestimate humans again?" Elias smiled faintly, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph in his eyes. "They may try," he said softly. "But one thing is certain. They'll never forget. We are unpredictable. We are daring. We are small, yes, but we can bite. And when we bite, the universe feels it." The humans on the Dauntless had shown the galaxy that courage was stronger than numbers, that ingenuity could outweigh firepower, and that determination could topple even the mightiest of empires. Across star systems, humans and allies alike began to believe again. Fear had once ruled them. Now hope burned brighter than any star. The Zarn, meanwhile, recalculated their strategies. They had underestimated humans, assumed that one tiny species could not challenge them, and learned their lesson in the harshest way possible. Every command, every calculation, every fleet movement from now on would account for humans, the unpredictable, fearless humans who could strike anywhere, at any time, with a power that was impossible to measure. Back on the Dauntless, the crew gathered together in the common area. They were tired, their bodies aching, their spirits heavy with the memory of the battle, yet a quiet joy pulsed through them. They had done the impossible. They had survived. They had proven that humans, even at their smallest, could make a difference that echoed across the galaxy. Elias watched his crew, pride swelling in his chest. These were ordinary humans, yes, yet extraordinary in courage and heart. They had faced impossible odds, navigated chaos, and emerged victorious. And in doing so, they had become more than a ship and a crew. They had become a symbol, a spark of hope, a warning to the galaxy that humanity could never be ignored. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "They thought we were weak. They thought a flea could do nothing. But a flea can bite, and one bite can change everything." And so the legend of the human flea was born. Across distant worlds, across star systems and colonies, humans would be remembered not for their size but for their heart, not for their strength but for their courage, not for their predictability but for their audacity. In the galaxy's endless expanse, the story of the Dauntless and its crew became a symbol of hope, a tale of fear turned to triumph, and a testament to what humans could achieve. Small, fragile, underestimated, but unbreakable in spirit, unpredictable in action, unstoppable in heart. And as the Dauntless floated quietly among the stars, the galaxy knew one thing for certain. The human flea had entered battle, and the universe would never be the same again.